companies. So welcome, Dr. Melissa.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So this is new for me to be spending time with people in this way. I'm used to standing in a room and being able to read how my words are landing. So I have no way of knowing if you are sighing or rolling your eyes or riveted by the words coming out of my mouth. So I ask for a little bit of grace for me because this is the first time I've done this. And I bet I'm a little bit of an outlier for ACG to have a psychologist on here. We're going to take the topics maybe a little bit deeper than what you may previously have enjoyed. It sounds like a wonderful organization. I know some of the folks involved. So I want to extend to you an invitation to be here and to be present with me. Draw a line. Draw a line. What was before, just be here now. It might feel a little decadent to indulge a handful of moments where you just get to think about your internal landscape. And I think that's part of the potential upside with what we've been going through, that we haven't been able to go out to distract ourselves. So we've had to focus inward. Now, the downside of that is that we are paying attention to our experiences of depression and anxiety in unprecedented ways. I can tell you I am really busy. People that do what I do, both personally and professionally, I have friends that are texting me like, hey, what was that medication about 3 years you told me that I should try? And then professionally, because I do so much work with business owners and leaders in companies, it's been, as you can imagine, quite a ride. And I'm walking it too. It's pretty unusual for me to walk the walk that my clients are walking. I had one 24-hour period where several $1,000s worth of speaking engagements were canceled. My kids were home from school too. So I'm in this with you kind of in unprecedented ways. I decided today to just talk with you and frame this as sort of a, let's pretend that we are doing an individual like coaching or executive therapy session. So I want to ask you to get a piece of paper and a pen and pretend like I'm actually asking you these questions and I really want to know your answer so that you can jot down thoughts. I'm going to give you action items and maybe some homework that you take with you, because at the end of the day, what I really want is for you to leave with something to do, so something that you might do differently, and I want you to think about something in a new way. That's really at the core of my intention today for you. So if you live to be 90, you get about 48 million minutes, a little less than that on this planet. And I view that as the most precious currency. Every choice I make, I measure the allocation of minutes as if it's a transaction. Do I want to spend 53 minutes crafting a very pithy comeback to that insane person on Twitter? If the answer is no, backspace, 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 delete, I get those minutes money back in the bank. And so I endeavor to make the highest and best use of the time that in the minutes you've given me this morning. I take that very, very seriously. So let's talk a little bit about, okay, the why me and the why now, the statement of the problem. I'm big into operational definitions. So first of all, why me? So I view significant learning as being a byproduct of a significant relationship. And we don't have a significant relationship right now. You're through this little camera lens right here on my laptop. So I'm going to share maybe some personal things that are, for me, even this is new. And I tend to share some personal things. It's kind of more my jam, and it's what psychologists tend to do. But I also today will maybe share a little bit more for the first time. And I want you to kind of imagine, as I said, that you are answering some of the questions that I'm asking and jot those down. So we're going to approximate a significant relationship as much as we can. And we're going to define the problem. So me, why should you listen to anything I have to say? So this is the first time I've ever shared my story in this way. Now, if you met me at a dinner party and say, what do you do? Because this is our cultural norm, right? I might say, oh, I'm a clinical psychologist that has my own practice and my specialty is mental toughness. So that is how I might answer that question. So the long form answer will mimic a little bit about what my introduction shared with you. So I was adopted by a preacher man and his wife in 1973. And my social class experience was probably one a lot of folks can relate to, where I had maybe a finger into the poverty pie and then a finger around a rung of lower middle class, but didn't know it. In the 70s, you didn't necessarily know that. I remember where I was and what I was wearing when the Challenger exploded, when I heard Nirvana's album the first time, when Magic disclosed he had HIV, when 9/11 happened. So I'm solidly Gen X. I went straight through school, kind of as an accident and serendipity, work ethic, meet some people who were gracious with me because I had no real mentorship. I finished my PhD at 27 and decided I really didn't know anything and wanted to expose myself to different worlds of work, and accepted a position as a project director. I inherited a $3.5 million budget, about a dozen staff, nurses, community volunteers, and was charged with integrating this system between Revco, a pharmacy system up in Northwest Ohio, Suma Health System, and Kent State. And I loved it. So for about 15 years, I ended up serving as a project lead or a manager, a leader in various capacities, where it was stakeholder projects, which is code for all of these people have different agendas and you have to try to align them and get them to work in some way toward a common goal. And I loved that work, but I never stopped doing teaching and my clinical work part-time on the side. And as she mentioned, I have worked with sexual and war trauma survivors since 1993. I did an internship in the Assistant District Attorney's Office in the city of Philadelphia in the Family Violence Sexual Assault Unit for about 4 months. And that has stuck with me. I've never stopped carrying those stories, and they are definitely a piece of my world now. And that will be relevant in a second. I taught my first graduate level class in 1999, and I fell in love with teaching. So I've managed to do this fusion of things that I've loved over the course of my career. Now, what I started to notice is that high functioning teams and people who thrived post-trauma had some things in common. And I, maybe a decade ago, started writing and thinking about what those things are. Can you teach those things? And if so, what could be possible? So that's where grit practices come from. And I'm going to spend time with you today sharing what those are. They are informed from my personal experience, they're informed from my professional experience, and they're informed from research. So I'm going to walk you through those things today, and let's get started. So yesterday, I had a call with a client, and we had to do a call because someone in her family had been exposed to COVID, and I've worked with her a long time. So she answered the phone with this: "Oh my God, if I have to watch one more commercial that starts like this, in this time of unprecedented change, in these days of chaos and unpredictability." And she went on and imitated the intros where all the marketing teams have pivoted to be on message with people's experiences. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to be that for you guys. So I'm going to skip that part. Okay. We know what's going on: fear, anxiety, depression, grief. That's been written about. What I would like to do is talk about kind of that next layer down of what's going on for people internally, your team, your clients, your family, and it touches all of those things, and it's relevant for business in brand new ways for obvious reasons. So let's get started. So G is gratitude. 2 years ago, I was having a call with somebody, an intake call, and this person was a referral of a referral. It kind of tends to work that way. And they were miserably employed in a senior leadership position at a university system down south. And so the ask was, okay, is this in my head? Is this me, or is it the system? So within about 10 minutes of being on the call, this person says to me, if one more expletive person tells me that I just need to focus on what I am, colorful expletive, grateful for, I'm going to punch that very colorful expletive person in the throat. So needless to say, I immediately liked this person. Fast forward 2 years, it wasn't in their head. The system was septic, and they, well, before COVID, that certainly wrinkled their world, were very happily employed in a new position in an Ivy up in the Northeast. So I want you to know, I appreciate skepticism. In fact, I encourage it. So throughout the day, if there are notions that kind of chaff your khakis, write them down and send me an email about it. We can talk about it. I really try to engage with folks meaningfully after we have time like this together. So where does G come from? Probably about 12 years ago, Tracy walked into my office, and within about 2 minutes, I knew she didn't want to be there. Now, it became clear she was polite, put together, beautiful human being. It was clear that she had a story to tell, and it was clear that she grew up in chaos, poverty, and that there were stories she'd never told and was maybe questioning whether she wanted to tell. So I told her at the end of our time together, and she was so polite, oh, so civil, hey, people who have your story often have other stories they've never told. Based on what you've described, adults may have had access to you in unsupervised ways when you were young. My guess is there's pain there, and I need you to think about if I'm the person you can trust with those stories. And she said, okay, and she left. And 6 months later, she came back and sat down in my office, and I said, okay, did you decide you trusted me? And she said, oh, it was never about trusting you. It was about trusting myself. And we worked together for 2 years. Now, her stories are outlier stories, like take your breath away, like would suck the oxygen out of the room where you are sitting right now. And yet, she always flanked these horror stories with experiences of gratitude and appreciation. Always, she peppered in this awareness of goodness. And that struck me over a dozen years ago, because I hear bad stories and I hear people who do this. And I thought, wow, that's really extraordinary that she's able to do this. And so I started researching this construct of gratitude. So there's a research center out at Berkeley that is called the Greater Good, and it's awesome. And of course, it's from California, right? They do research on gratitude, and their definition of gratitude is an awareness of goodness, and that the goodness comes from outside of yourself. But I've added a third leg to that stool, and it is you claim that goodness in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. That is a radical act if you are a trauma survivor. It's radical. And in the age of COVID, when goodness may be hard to find, it gives us, I guess, a mental practice that I think is ground zero for mental toughness during this chapter. Gratitude is not the solution. I think it's been sort of lost over the last few years. When I was talking about this a decade ago, there were not like these things about gratitude journals, and I think it's become diluted. And in fact, I think this inverse thing can happen where people sit in my office, especially people with depression, and they're like, here's my list of all the good things, and I still feel like shit, and that makes me feel worse because this list of gratitudes doesn't help. It doesn't work that way. It really, truly is the interrupter. It's simply the pause button in that cognitive hamster wheel that we get going in, where you go, okay, there is goodness. I can hold two things in my hands at the same time. It isn't about canceling out the bad. Good does not cancel out bad, but it is an interrupter. It creates cognitive distance, which is a useful tool to have. So I want to read for you some of the, I wrote some things down here so I didn't forget. So here are some direct quotes, okay, from people over the last 10 weeks. I'm grateful for this time to focus on my book. That never would have happened. I had a really aggressive travel schedule. I'm grateful for the opportunity to show up for my team in ways they never would have received. They are fearful and allowing me to be stable for them in new ways. It's satisfying to me. I'm grateful for the kick in the you-know-what to finally make that move. If not now, when? I'm grateful for the opportunity to get rid of some staff that I'd been afraid to let go. I'm grateful for the time to be home. There's no travel thing. It's the first time in my 10 years in this job. I'm kind of enjoying it. Now you might say, with an eye roll, okay, so these folks maybe had semi-remote jobs, have white-collar programming positions where they've been able to pivot. But let me tell you something. All of these sentences have been said by people who, in the story of their life, have walked in the door to find someone they loved deceased on a bathroom floor, lost not one but two adult children, were abused by a priest from the age of 4 to 12, recently lost millions of dollars in the market, had to let collectively probably 1,200 people go. So these folks are not Pollyanna unicorn fart people. They are living real stuff. They are dealing with things that are extremely stressful, and yet they have the capacity to press pause and honor what is good, that it does exist. Again, it's not the solution, it's the interrupter. That's why it's ground zero for everything that comes next, because you have to do it first. So how do you train your brain to do this? Our brains are Teflon for good and flypaper brain for bad. They really are. We are built to remember bad stuff. And we know that that was evolutionarily adaptive. And you've probably, this is a pretty sophisticated crew here, you've probably seen the studies or read the research. You know, our brain, we were meant to remember bad stuff so that we would survive. Because if you walked out of your cave and you ate the yellow cone flower and you didn't remember that it killed 80% of the people in your group and you ate it, then you died too. But if you remembered, oh, the last time we ate that yellow cone flower, everybody died, I'm not going to eat the yellow cone flower, that capacity to remember bad stuff has been evolutionarily advantageous. The problem is now it's not yellow cone flowers, saber-toothed tigers. That's a popular one that's out there about fear. It is emails and annoying coworkers and things that are not necessarily life-threatening. So we haven't evolved our brain to the point where we can adjust to this. So you have to be active in your practice, okay? So what can you do? Keep a 21-day gratitude journal. One sentence every day for 21 days that you write something that you appreciate or you are grateful for. If I can get gigantic defensive linemen that sit in here, I'm in my office, you should see these gigantic leather club chairs I have to accommodate those big bodies. If I can get them to do it, you can do it. So one sentence gratitude journal, okay, 21 days, and then just track and see what happens. Write a letter to somebody that you're so thankful you cross paths with, maybe an old teacher. I am married to a teacher, and those notes, when they show up, oh, they land. They really do land. So do it. How about this? The person you're stuck in your house with for 7 days in a row, write the day and the time that you appreciate something they did, very specific. Like on Tuesday, you emptied the dishwasher, even you know that's normally my job. Thank you for that. And give it to them on the 8th day. I'm telling you, no one has ever said that they were appreciated too much. Never a sentence that has been uttered in my office. And then finally, look for ways to virtually express your gratitude. You know, I've had presidents and CEOs of companies share, you know, who share this like core value with me, how they try to do this. They're sending, you know, cookies to people's homes. They are sending cards. They're delivering somebody's favorite six-pack. They're finding ways to show, I see you, I appreciate you. Be creative. Sending a little card electronically, showing and demonstrating appreciations is a way of getting your own dopamine and serotonin kick. Okay, all right, so that's G. R is responsibility. So Gabe stumbled into my office as a referral from Executive Health at Ohio State. I have a pretty close working relationship with them, and I try to accommodate referrals. It's tough, but I try. So Gabe comes in and he sits down, and his goal, or his presenting complaint, was he had just been promoted about 8 months previous to a kind of middle management position, and he was managing a team of about 15 people and said, I think I'm screwing it up. I don't think I'm doing a very good job, and I'm pretty sure that this has something to do with what's my childhood story. So he starts sharing with me what's going on, and it became clear that he suffered a tremendous loss as a child when his father died, and the family system was just chaos. So he, at a very young age, become what we call the parentified child, where we, children are put in the position of being an adult too soon, where they're taking care of things, and that's something a lot of people can relate to. So in the process of chatting about it, he said to me, I think this is this barrier. I identify this theme here of codependency. And I asked him, I said, hey, how about, it sounds to me, you get a lot of feedback that you're like your dad. And you have these beautiful memories of him from when you were young. What if you wrote him a letter to share what your experience was after he was gone and what you're experiencing now? His eyes get really big. He like leans forward in his chair and he's like, I could never do that. And he was pissed. So I just sat there, because that's what we do, and kind of let him breathe through it. And he slowly started to relax back into the chair and said, oh my God, I have a problem. I said, I know you do. And he said, I'm taking responsibility for a dead man's emotions. So R stands for responsibility. And I'm asking you to think through this construct in this way. Responsible to versus responsible for. When I stand in front of teams or big conferences, I will ask them, what are you responsible for? And people will list all kinds of things. My mortgage, my team, the list goes on and on. So I ask you, okay, what are you responsible for? Okay. And I want you to draw a line down the piece of paper, and then on the other side, write responsible to. Because what happens is people take responsibility for things that are not real, they're illusions. You are not responsible for other people's emotions. You are not responsible for other people's lives. You're just not. Now, that's the kind side of that. The ugly side of that is taking responsibility for enlightening people. Now, I don't know about you, but a frequent conversation I have in here, and something that we navigate in my household with my spouse of a couple decades, is when you're in the middle of a conflict, life lessening the other person, like telling them about themselves when emotions are high. Can you relate to that? It's a frequent thing that we have conversations about in my office. It is not the time to life lesson people when emotions are high. So taking responsibility for enlightening someone. Nope. You are responsible to yourself and your moral code. So in the absence of the moral code, it's a little scary, right? Because you think, well, God, if I'm not responsible for other people and just myself, isn't that selfish? And isn't that dangerous? Isn't that ultimately sociopathy? And yeah, you're not wrong. It gets a little murky without the moral code. So I often challenge clients to go, okay, what's your moral code? 3, 5, or 7. I love the odd number BuzzFeed type list. 3, 5, or 7. So that's a homework assignment. What is your moral code? What do you come back to? So one of mine is better living by boundaries. Okay. I love boundaries, emotional boundaries, physical boundaries. I believe in the power of boundaries. So that's one of mine. And so it guides the decisions that I might make. And during this time where you might be making some really unwelcome decisions, it is important to understand the power of that you can come back to, well, this behavior, this decision, this act is in alignment with my moral code. I am responsible to that. You're responsible to your role as a CEO, a president, a team lead, a managing partner. You're responsible to the role. And that gives you a little bit of cognitive distance to lower the emotional quotient, which is necessary. Because if there's anything that kills complex problem solving and empathy, it's anxiety and high emotion. And I think you see that now with anxiety high, there's this sort of challenge to complex problem solve. It was my theory about the toilet paper thing at the beginning of this, that people wanted a simple problems to solve. But then I saw this great piece about how residential and commercial toilet paper are made in different factories and have totally different supply chains. And so it was actually probably a function of supply chain, and that everybody knew they were going home, so they bought more toilet paper. It wasn't that they were necessarily hoarding at the extreme level. Isn't that an interesting little thing? So I found that interesting little tidbit. So complex problem solving and anxiety go out the window when emotions are high. And when we take responsibility for all of these things we have no business taking responsibility for, it can be derailing. So write your moral code. That's your homework assignment. And I want to talk here, this is sort of spontaneous, but I want to talk here a little bit about boundaries. Okay, so I believe that the statement of the problem here, in addition to the fear, depression, anxiety, and grief, are these sub experiences. Okay, so they really are. One, people have muscle memory for pain. And if I asked you to identify what you felt like and write a list over the last 8 weeks, just write the emotions you've been experiencing and then put it away for a few minutes, and then come back and look at that list and go, okay, what other experiences in my life mimic this? What might this be reminiscent of? And I can tell you, at least the conversations in here, the experience of having your power taken away, having people make decisions for you that you don't get a vote in, feeling stuck somewhere, feeling physically confined. These are things that replicate previous pain for people and can really exacerbate mood disorders and anxiety. So if you can relate to that, you're not alone. Grief would be another one. The second psychological experience here that is messing with people is boundaries. Better living by boundaries. Okay, work just went home. And I'm a big believer that compartmentalization is actually an adaptive psychological function, and that's been obliterated for our students in school, for our workers, for the leaders. Work went home. We used to be able to leave home if things were painful there, go to work and just have a cognitive respite. Or if things were a train wreck at work, you could go home and be with your kids. There's something adaptive about that. One of the phrases that I hate is work-life balance. And I'm sorry, I just hate it because it's not real. And it's a thing that people sit in my office and say, well, I'm also failing at work-life balance. And so I hate it for that reason. I believe a more descriptive term is to have a proportional identity portfolio. And I got this idea from a few years ago when my Oppenheimer Fund packet came, those tissue paper thin books with all that data in it. And I just leafed through it, marveling at all the people that have jobs to analyze that pie chart that I have of where my money is. And I don't understand any of it, but they do. And they care enough to send it to me. And I think, God, doesn't a human life deserve that level of care and analysis? N equals 1, sample size of 1. That's definitely my sweet spot. And do you do that for yourself? Do you make a little life pie chart? It's a thing I love to ask clients to do. Like my engineers and like analyst people will come in with color-coded Excel spreadsheets down to the 100th percentage point. My graphic designers will come in with vision boards. And I once had an architect who I just adore come in with a 3D model on her laptop. And I just think it's delightful. So you can take that on as an action item too. And it fits under R because it helps you decide what you're responsible for, okay? So draw a circle, do a life pie chart. How do you divide that up? Are you allocating minutes in alignment with that life pie chart? And if not, why? And can you address it? It helps to look at things as seasons or chapters too. Because when folks are, working toward an IPO or just got VC money and are trying to build something, like they'll come in with pie charts where I'm like, dude, that's so not possible. You're going to go crazy. We need to do a 30-day pie chart where you're working about 18 hours a day. That's realistic. See, this is why I don't like the work-life balance thing, because I think that there are chapters where you have a diverse identity portfolio and you allocate those minutes depending on contextual demands. And the successful people that I work with, they know how to do that. They know how to shift those pieces around. Well, part of the train wreck emotionally right now is that pie chart is messed up. There are no lines. For people with ADHD, it's, oh my gosh, because you're home and you're task switching constantly. So if you find yourself exhausted and you know you have ADHD, you're not alone because you're task switching. So the mental real estate that you have to allocate to go from, I don't understand 5th grade math, how can I help you do that? Back to, oh, I actually have to do this report for my person. That's really taxing for people. So this R helps you. It helps during this time of all these blurry boundaries. I. So intention. I stands for intention. You know, it's a thing, and there's these great YouTube clips, and people have talked about knowing your why recently, and I think it's powerful. I love the construct. And for me, because I'm always looking at making it actionable, I like to think about it in terms of intentions. Why are you doing what you're doing? Whether it's a certain behavior or a certain decision over time. And a prereq for knowing your why is self-awareness. The data suggests about 10% of people are self-aware, which is a really bad statistic. And it's hard. Self-awareness is really hard. Last fall, I was running errands with my now 14-year-old daughter, and it was a blustery fall Saturday, and we walked into a Subway, and no one else was in there. And there were 2 people behind the counter. One was clearly training the other one. So we approached the counter, and this training session continues while we're standing there, and it went something like this. So like you like pick this bread up and you like pick this piece of cheese up, and I know it's like so slimy, like right for a few minutes, and I feel the eyeballs. Okay, I feel it starting already because my kids know how I feel about overuse of the word like. So I took a deep breath and I said, okay, all right, I'm gonna win this one. So we finally get some attention. And I order, my kid orders, I order a salad, and she asked me if I would like it toasted. So in a millisecond, I saw my future, and I feel the 14-year-old's eyes on me. And I arranged my face, and I modulated my tone, and I said, well, since it's a salad, no? And I look down at my daughter, and she looks up at me, and she says, fail. Not epic fail, but still a fail. See, my kids have told me that if I think a process or a system is stupid, that I can be rude, even kind of mean. What? Like what? I think of myself as kind and generous. I donate to charity. I never get road rage. I give money to somebody when they're short on change in the line at Target. I let people cut in front of me if they have 2 items. I pick up litter. Like my self-concept is that I'm kind and I'm generous. But my teenagers have told me I have a flaw. And it took someone without an agenda and without fear to be honest with me. And you know what? They're right. They're right. So who in your life gives you honest feedback? And the reason this is a prereq for intention is that if you can't hear criticism or you can't contemplate somebody else's point of view, then it's really, really hard to have clarity of intention. Now, about 9 to 10% of the population can't do this because they have a personality disorder. Sorry, not to sound depressing, but it's true. And they show up everywhere. And they're usually the folks that when folks sit in here, they don't last very long because they don't want to psychologically spelunk. But I certainly work with a lot of folks who have them on their teams or work for them, and they try to figure out the strategy for managing it. Slight sidebar. So who tells you the truth? I was up at Honda, I don't know, maybe last year in a room with maybe 100 engineers, and I told them this, but like, hey, about 10% of people, and there are barriers to self-awareness. And I asked them, I'm like, have any of you ever lied on your 360 for your boss? And like, no one raised their hand. And I was like, wow, you guys are a statistical outlier. My gosh, this is amazing. And 3 of them came up to me afterwards and said, oh, we couldn't answer that honestly. He was in the room. So case in point, okay? How do you get honest feedback about who you are and how you show up in the world? And it's interesting because there's this push-pull happening right now that as external feedback is diminishing, we are able to get it in maybe new ways. You're stuck at home with maybe new people. You are on Zoom calls that are recorded. So perhaps you could go back and watch, like, oh, did I interrupt that person? Did I give that person time to speak? What really gets me in these meeting dynamics? There may be some new opportunities to look at yourself that weren't there before. So intention is powerful, and it's more powerful than a goal because it unhooks you from what you get back. So one of the things that you can do is pick your word of the year and see if that gives you some clarity. So over the years, I've picked a word of the year, and it has really been responsible for me finding my biological family, for me taking a 6-week cross-country RV trip, for me building my practice and going off on my own. A word of the year can be a clarifying word. It brings everything back to that focus or intention. So toughness, T. Who is the toughest person that you know? And why? What makes them tough? What did they do? Do they have a certain set of beliefs? Now, if we were together, we would share some stories, but we're not together. So just maybe write that name down and later go back to examine why your instinct was that person. So toughness, as I see it, is the willingness and capacity to tolerate psychological uncomfortableness. Okay? I believe truly that the capacity to tolerate psychological uncomfortableness is emotional intelligence in the 21st century. We've done a lot of things to screw this up. The self-esteem movement of the 80s went sideways, okay? Parenting norms. I think it's a frequent conversation in my house, and I taught college kids, and I saw the transition happen, and I get to hear the stories about the transition over the last couple decades. And so cultural norms, parenting norms, and I think that we've screwed this up because anxiety is not a sign that you're broken. And feeling uncomfortable is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a data point. It's a data point, and it's necessary to experience it so that you can make a different decision or arrange things differently in your head. So toughness really is about learning to tolerate psychological uncomfortableness. Now, I have like 10 mental toughness bullet points, and I put things in a PowerPoint slide, and it's on my website. So because I knew we wouldn't have time to get through all of it today, but you can download it for free. It's just right there, just a PowerPoint. So if you go to behaveforward.com, under, I think it's topics and samples, way at the bottom, there is a toughness challenge, and it's just some PowerPoints. Print them out and read them, and whichever one irritates you is maybe the one to pay attention to and go talk to somebody like me about. I want to encourage you to do that. So toughness really truly is this willingness and capacity to behave forward in spite of what you feel. So our emotions exist and they're precious, but our wise mind exists too. So our emotion mind and our wise mind. So I want you to picture like 2 circles, like a Venn diagram. And our emotion mind cannot drive the train. It just can't. It informs things. It's precious. It's unique, but it is not our wise mind. The wise mind is the investigative journalism mind, okay? One of the things that's happening right now is people are making movies. So I almost think this is close to one of my core values, no movie making. And here's what I mean by that. Cognitive distortions are the things that screw up our experience of psychological uncomfortableness. They exacerbate them, okay? So movie making is this. Have you ever been waiting for somebody and they were like 20 minutes late, and you call them on their phone and they don't answer, and in that 20 minutes, you have them like in a ditch on the side of 71, And then they walk in the door and you're like freaking out. Oh my gosh. And they say, well, we ran out of milk. I went back and then my phone died. I'm really, really sorry. So you made a movie. You made a movie of an apocalyptic, catastrophic ending based on fiction and actually had a real physical response. I mean, this is essentially what a panic attack is. Can I tell you how many phone calls I've gotten about that? I mean, literally, probably half a dozen from friends who texted me or called me and said, I think I just had a panic attack in the paper goods aisle at Giant Eagle. That's movie making. It's having a catastrophic, apocalyptic imagination scenario and then having a real physical experience. The physical experience is real. Once you tripwire the amygdala, the hippocampus and the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system, the limit, all the stuff gets involved. Your capillaries shrink literally because in the past that was so if you got cut in a battle, you wouldn't bleed out. Your salivary glands shut off, your heart rate goes up, your pulse goes up. I mean, there's all kinds of systems that feel really bad and they're meant to be like, boom, instantaneous to jump out of the way of a rattlesnake. But that's not what's happening right now in coronavirus. We are triggering and triggering and triggering that system and it feels terrible. One of the things you can do is stop making movies. So track it. How many movies do you make? Apocalyptic movies. I'm going to be living in a box under a bridge. That's probably not true. Don't make movies. Track it and investigative journalism it. Okay, write the statement of the problem at the top, draw a line down a piece of paper, write all of the movie making you're doing, and on the other side, write, okay, he stated this, she stated that. Evidence would suggest that. Write the facts. And it usually can shake the trees a little bit and calm you down and give you a little space to identify a pragmatic action. So, in the spirit of mental toughness, I would like to charge you with a 21-day gratitude journal, a 7-day letter of appreciation to somebody that you care about, a note to somebody you appreciated in the past. This is about brain training to understand there's goodness. Two things can exist at the same time. You can hold both. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and there's goodness. You can claim it. What are you responsible to and responsible for? What you're responsible to might be a long list, but what you're responsible for is pretty short. Write your moral code, 3, 5, or 7. What are the principles you want to live by so that you can come back to those and release yourself from the rest? Setting your intentions, being clear about your why. Maybe you create a list of people who are honest with you and talk to them. Ask them for feedback about what's going on right now. How are you doing? I get to watch people who aren't good at this, and I get to watch people who are great at it. And they're good at getting honest feedback from people who disagree with them. Pick a word of the year. It's just going to be your 2020 word of the year. I picked one January 1st, and wow, I mean, it's going to be a challenge to manifest that, but I'm not as well. And finally, mental toughness. Read through those slides, take a look at some of those principles and how you may put them into action in your daily life. Because really, at the end of the day, there was a before, this is a now, and we will have a next. And your capacity to behave forward, you have all the tools you need. You've got them. You've got them right in your hands. You just need to deploy them in spite of your uncomfortableness. So I hope that you leave here with something useful to take with you for yourself, for your family, for your team. Your customers are living this too. You are not responsible for all of that. And we can do some chat questions. We can communicate in a way that feels like doable here. And I appreciate you inviting me into your morning. And I hope that you got something useful out of our minutes together this morning. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Melissa. That was really great. I found that really encouraging and gave me a lot to think about for sure. And,
Good.
And maybe put into practice. I want to open it up for questions. I have the chat box open. We'll give it a minute. If anyone has any questions or comments or any feedback. I'll also try to, I'll find that link you were referencing on your website and see if I can get that out to everybody so they can
Sure. It's great.
pull that out. Let's see. No questions for anyone? Well, if anyone does have any questions, they can always shoot me an email and I can follow up with Dr. Melissa. Maybe she could answer some of those later if anything comes up. With that said, I'm going to kick things over for a quick wrap up to Mike Abramo with Plant Moran. Mike, are you available?
Yep, I'm here, Nikki. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No, I just want to close with, again, thank you to Dr. Melissa. We appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise with us today. We also wanted to thank all the attendees. So hopefully you found this content to be very helpful amidst the current environment, and make sure you're doing your homework. Nikki mentioned I'm with Plant Moran. We're a full service CPA firm here in Central Ohio. We are proud to support the ACG organization through our sponsorship, and I also serve on the board here for the Columbus chapter. So we ACG Columbus, we're continuing to work on our upcoming virtual programs and events. Please be sure to check the website, watch your emails, and if you have any questions about membership, you can reach out directly to Nikki. And with that, everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.